What's up, y'all? Welcome on into the GoVols247 Podcast. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio here on a pleasant Monday afternoon in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a chilly morning here in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee, which means that, of course, it is fall. Fall has arrived, at least in weather, if nothing else. I think it technically arrived a while back in terms of the name of the season, but it still felt like summer. Now it's actually feeling like fall, which is good because it is third Saturday in October week. Hope you all had a good weekend. I hope everything was good in your life. If you're a Tennessee fan, I imagine it was better than if you're a Florida fan. I mean, unless you're one of those Florida fans who desperately wants more losses to guarantee that Billy Napier's gone. I guess maybe some of those people, are maybe just as happy as you are as a Tennessee fan. But regardless, not the prettiest game, but Tennessee did get it done against Florida 23-17 in overtime. And now the Vols are turning the page and looking forward to Alabama week, the Crimson Tide, who interestingly did not drop in the polls. Tennessee did, however, which on its face you would say, okay, that's fine, drop Tennessee. But did you just not watch the Bama game? That's an interesting topic. I suppose different programs have different amounts of equity in the sports writer bank or the coach's bank. So that is what it is right now. But that'll be settled this week anyway. So it does not really matter that much. Here to talk about Tennessee, Florida, and Tennessee, Alabama, and I suppose whatever else they want to talk about. Got Patrick Brown down there at his undisclosed location, Ryan Callahan at his home daycare center. Fellas, what's up today? I guess I'll go to Pat first.
I'm good. I always enjoy your meteorologist Wes Rucker weather reports to kick off these podcasts.
I just like to set the scene. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day.
It is. It feels like fall. It feels like it should be Tennessee, Alabama week.
It's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, it's a nice day. I prefer warmer weather, so I don't love when it gets cooler, but it's not too cold yet, so I can live with this. And yeah, like you said, it feels like Tennessee, Alabama week. So and everyone in a little happier mood after Saturday. A lot of angst throughout that game, but maybe feeling a little bit better. Just I think people kind of talking themselves into realizing, okay, we don't beat Florida that often. Might as well enjoy it.
That's what I was saying after the game. Like, give yourself at least a couple days to enjoy it. It's happened 3 times in the past 7,300 days. Like, enjoy it. That would be but again, I'm not going to tell people how to live their lives. It's just, I don't understand if you don't want to enjoy a Tennessee over Florida win because it doesn't happen very often. But I get really excited. It's a combination of interesting things because I get more excited to cover the Tennessee Alabama football game than I do any other football game of the year. It doesn't matter what the records are. It doesn't matter where the game is. It doesn't matter, what else is going on in college football. To me, like, those two uniforms on the field represent just about as cool as college football gets, with some of the old tradition and, fan bases that really don't like each other, but at the end of the day do have respect for each other. And it's just the two of the greatest fight songs in college athletics, just a whole bunch of good things. And we'll talk about that game here in a little bit, but I think we need to put the Florida game to bed first because we got to do that game justice. Not for its performance necessarily, but for its result, certainly. It was a game. I know, Pat, after some of the post-game podcasts, we're all doing a million things. You're doing 2 million things. So we don't have you on the post-game podcasts. What were your initial sort of thoughts on that game, and have they changed in the past, 24, 48 hours?
Yeah, I would agree that Tennessee has not beaten Florida enough to complain about the manner in which it beats Florida. This felt like a game that for a lot of it, Tennessee was going to lose. It just felt like, we've seen this movie before. They're getting outplayed by Florida. Florida looks like, I don't want to say the better team, but, Florida is rising to the occasion while Tennessee is doing stupid things to lose to Florida, which we've seen for the better part of the last 20 years. But then you look at Tennessee, I thought a big sequence in the game was in the third quarter, down 10-0, when they absolutely had to put a drive together. There was very little hope. You could just sense it in the stadium. There wasn't a lot of belief at that point in the stands. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case on the sideline because they went out there and finally put together a touchdown drive. But it just felt like at that point, like people were, I don't want to say writing them off, but there was not a lot of hope in the stands. There's not a lot of hope in the game thread on GoVols247, which is where hopes and positive vibes often go to die if the Vols aren't playing well.
Mm-hmm.
But the team dug deep and backs against the wall. They put that drive together. Then they get the interception on the other side of it. They go take the lead. They can't hold the lead. They basically do what they did against Arkansas, where all three phases sort of don't close the game out. But again, they dug deep and recovered and reset for overtime, and were able to make a few plays there. So I think it says a lot about a team if you can do that. I don't think you should overlook or discount that ability for a team to win when they don't play well, or win a game ugly, if you want to call it that. And you could probably even say it's progress, considering that it really kind of played out a lot like the Arkansas game, but Tennessee was able to get the different result, different outcome of that game. But overall, I thought, the offense, again, sort of a rerun, right? Something was just a little bit off every time. But I saw more things to be encouraged about on the offense than coming out of Arkansas, which I thought was pretty bleak. And defensively, again, they just kind of live on the edge. They'll give up some yards and give up some plays, but man, you can't deny their ability to rise up and make key plays in key spots. And again, this is the first time since 1969 that Tennessee has held 6 straight opponents to start a season under 20 points. I think West probably covered that team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's 1969. Yeah, I remember that. I was a kid, and the Cubs choked to allow the Mets, the Miracle Mets, to go there and win. Ron Santo and those guys. That was a tough year for us. But yeah, no, I was. Even I was not alive then.
Well, even if you were a Tennessee fan who's also a Mets fan, first of all, you suck because the Mets suck. But you probably heard that and were thinking, hey, this is the year. This is the Mets year. Tennessee's doing things they haven't done since '69. The Mets are in the NLCS, and then didn't they get battered pretty good in game 1?
Right? Wasn't pretty. The most expensive team in baseball is doing what it does.
Well, we don't need to get me started on the Dodgers either, but it wasn't pretty, but it's a win. I mean, and you look at this league right now, and it looks like it is survival of the fittest from week to week. I mean, 4 games last week in the SEC were decided by a combined 18 points, I think. I'm not very good at math, but I mean, LSU Ole Miss is won in overtime. Alabama, South Carolina goes to the final play. Tennessee just had a game last week against Arkansas, go to the final play. It looks like it just might be kind of one of those years in this league. Maybe Texas has risen above the fray at this point. There's not a lot of maybe flaws in that team yet, but they're going to play Georgia this week, so we'll see. And Georgia's only beaten Mississippi State by 10. So everybody would love for Tennessee to go out there and win every game 45-0. They would have loved, after all the frustration and futility of this Florida series, for Tennessee to go out there as a top 10 team and look like a top 10 team and beat a team that's probably going to fire its coach here in a few weeks into submission. But that's not necessarily how this game always goes. So, but again, I saw positives from the offense. I think there were steps taken that lead you to think that, hey, maybe they aren't so far off. But and defensively, they continue to play well enough that they can rely on that side of the football to keep them in games and give them a shot to win every week.
Yeah, what I'm wondering, Ryan, and I guess then for Pat after that, we're going to talk probably more about the offense, right? Like that's probably more of the thing that we need to discuss because there's more questions there, more concerns there. But my question with defense, first off, we do need to note that Keenan Peely is out for the season. That was confirmed on Monday, although we sort of kind of knew that already. But still, just more proof that bad things happen to good people sometimes, and there's no real rhyme or reason for it. It's just what happened, and you hate that it's him because of everything that guy is and what he stands for, and for it to happen again this season is just it's. I don't like to use the word depressing, but it's a little depressing. Like when you think about just how fleeting this thing is. And if anything, I hope that it could be a reminder for some of the younger guys on the team, not that they need it, but just in case, like this game can be taken away from you very, very quickly. It can be taken away from you tomorrow. Like who puts in more than Keenan Peely does? And look what he's gotten out of it the past 2 years. I mean, it's every day you're out there that you get to play this game is a blessing. And I think that's, if anything good can come out of this, I hope that it's that. But my question, Ryan, and for Pat too, is at what point, when you look at Tennessee's defense, this would be the second week in a row where it has given up points, or given up yards and getting into the red zone, and then it makes a play. And at what point does that stop going from that's luck or that's good fortune to this is what the identity of this team is? Because some of it, like if it just happened a couple times here or there, I'd say you're pretty lucky. That goes into it. But for it to happen that many times, I think you have to stop wondering if it's luck and say, maybe there's just something about them that when a team gets into scoring range, they kick it up a notch. And that's, we've seen defenses do that before, but to this level, it seems a little extreme to me. Like if you can make the play back then, or, in scoring range, make the play on the other side of the field, make the play at the 50, and then that's better, because you're not flirting with disaster, Molly Hatchet style. So where am I crazy to think that, Ryan, or where is this? Is that luck? Is that just part of who they are? What's the deal there?
I would say it's a little of both. Like you said, if you could make the stop earlier, you certainly would like to, and not even give teams the chance to come that close to scoring. But yeah, you have to give them credit. The play by James Pierce on the quarterback sneak, that wasn't a goof by Graham Mertz. That's Pierce making something happen. So Tennessee's doing some things to force turnovers, to get timely stops on fourth downs, on third downs. That twice on third downs, Boo Carter involved in sacks that ended up being key plays. One in the fourth quarter, knocked Florida out of possible field goal range. In the second quarter, right before halftime, that essentially causes Florida to come away with nothing. Yep. So they've kind of found a way to, like you said, rise to the occasion in big situations, and there's a lot to be said for that. As much as you might hope that a defense can be as dominant as Tennessee's defense was the first 4 games of the season, I don't think it was realistic for them to keep that up at quite that clip. But if this is as bad as it gets, giving up more yards but still holding teams under 20 points, you'll take that all day. And under most Josh Heupel teams, we would say if you're going to hold teams under 20 every week, Tennessee's going to be hard to beat ever. So it's kind of amazing they've already lost the game, and that's what's made this offense frustrating for a lot of fans, is the defense has for the most part done what it needed to do to give Tennessee chances to win. But if they can keep this up, and this week will obviously be a big test of that, then this defense is doing more than enough for Tennessee to continue winning, and that's going to continue to carry this team, I think. So, yeah, give them credit for that. I think they do deserve that label to a degree, that they're just a defense that you can count on sort of rising to the occasion in a lot of situations. They're not perfect, but they're still very good, and I think they're showing that even though they're getting gashed a little bit more here the last couple of weeks, they're still one of the very best defenses in the SEC.
Yeah, and to your point, Ryan, you look at those 2 fourth down plays, Ricky Gibson, a great individual effort to track down Trey Wilson on a jet sweep. Now we can talk about the optics of a jet sweep on fourth and this much to go, but that's still a great play that he had to follow him across the formation, navigate some traffic. Arion Carter did a good job there setting the edge so that Wilson couldn't continue stringing it out towards the sideline as well.
And Pat,
good
to
team
your point,
defense like we've seen.
To your point, that's why you recruit speed at corner. Tennessee hasn't had guys that could make that play at times in the past. And you find a long, fast corner like Ricky Gibson, he just darts in there and makes a tremendous play. That's just natural ability.
Yeah, and McCoy plays great defense on the slant to break up a fourth down pass there. So I think something that is, Tennessee's defense, they may be giving up yards, but they're also giving themselves a chance to make those plays. Ron, while I was listening to you talk, I was looking up their big play stats. They've only allowed 3 plays of 30+ yards and 1 of 40+ yards. So you're not really giving up many home runs. Now you're giving up some 20+ yard plays, and they gave up some against Florida, but sometimes a 20-yard run is better than a 50-yard touchdown. It gives you a fighting chance to make another play, to get a team, behind the sticks into 2nd and 12 if you get a first down tackle for loss or a sack. If you can stop a team from, basically if you can keep them out of the end zone, you still have a chance to make a play. And that's what Tennessee's defense has done. I'm sure they're disappointed that for 2 weeks in a row, they had a chance to put the game to ice, put the game to bed, couldn't get a stop. And they had Florida 3rd and 18. I mean, it looked like the Gators might be kind of dead to rights there. And DJ Lagway made a pretty good play. And Tennessee safeties, I think Will Brooks said Monday that they didn't really play it right. And that's a mistake they need to fix. But this defense is giving itself chances by not allowing the home run. And so when you are as good as they are and are playing like they're playing, when you give yourself more chances to make something happen, eventually, maybe I guess the law of averages, if it's a penchant, if you've got a penchant for doing it, then eventually you'll make a play and get a turnover or hold a team to a field goal. So in this game, I think Florida got the red zone 6 times and scored 17 out of a possible 42 points. So, I mean, some of that was their own mistakes. And going back to what I said earlier, Florida made, I guess, more of the mistakes that lose you games. Both these teams made a lot of mistakes. It was kind of a calamity of errors or whatever you want to call it, as each team just kept doing dumb stuff. But Florida made more of those. And, obviously the injury to Graham Mertz didn't help. That was the turning point in the game as well. Really kind of an innocuous play. And Wes, you mentioned Keenan Peely being out for the season. Graham Mertz is going to be out for the season too. So two older players getting knee injuries and in this game is tough. But this defense, that I think there's a lot of belief on that side of the ball that as Ryan said, that they can make plays and they're giving themselves a chance to do so.
Yeah, I go back to, you talked about saving touchdowns. I can think of at least 2 plays off the top of my head where Christian Charles made a really nice play in space and kind of closed ground and prevented what could have been a touchdown and got the guy down before that. And I don't know if Florida got a touchdown either of those drives. So yeah, I mean, those are the plays that you need. I'm just questioning, if you can do that, then maybe you can do that a little earlier, or maybe they're just a defense that operates better in a compressed part of the field. I don't know. There could be reasons for that. I think on that 3rd and 18, obviously neither one of the safeties got where they needed to be, it looked like, on that play. And you could maybe argue, and again, I don't know what the call was, but you could maybe argue that T-Lander also, went a little too far forward and didn't give enough depth in his zone. I don't love when they're in zones. I just think they have more holes there than they do. And man, of course we say that, and then they'll go to a game where they do a lot of man and they'll get burnt to a crisp, but it just looks like the zones are giving them more troubles than sometimes. So we'll see. But go ahead.
I'll say the flip side to that discussion is Tennessee's offense got to figure out ways to close out games when they have late leads, and because it looks like they're going to the defense is having to go to the well one too many times, maybe, or whatever. But the one knock you can have on this defense is, like Patrick said, 2 weeks in a row you've allowed game tying or go ahead drives in the final minutes of the game. So they're wearing down, which they rotate enough. I don't think that's so much the issue. It's just a game with no margin for error. You're not giving your defense a chance to do anything but the heavy lifting. And Tennessee's offense keeps putting them out there with a tough situation, and they've not answered the bell in those final drives the last 2 weeks. So Tennessee's offense has got to give them some help and get some first downs with the game on the line when they're preserving a lead.
Yeah, and they'll be playing a more explosive offense this week. There's no question about that. Like, Alabama's not consistent offensively. It makes mistakes offensively, but Alabama still can be dynamite offensively. There are some big plays that are going to happen. They're going to make big plays against anybody they play because they've got a quarterback who can run and he's got a big arm, a little erratic, but he's got a big arm. And when he throws it right, he's really good. And, that receiver who's like 11 years old, he's always out there making plays. Ryan Williams is very, very good. They've got good backs, Jam Miller and those guys. They're good. They're good tight ends. Like, they're going to make plays. But if they make plays and Tennessee keeps them inside the red zone and then it compresses the field and holds them to 3 or a turnover, then that's still going to be maybe enough. But we'll see. It's going to be different, certainly, without Peely out there. They did okay against Florida, and Lagway's a really talented kid. But Eugene Wilson is a very, very, very good player. He's very, very good. But They're playing a different level, I think, this week. I think we can all say that. And now they're doing it without Peely. And so that's going to put a lot on T-Lander. It's going to put a lot on Arion Carter. And they're going to have to get, Edwin Spillman healthy. Caleb Perry's going to have to take his game to another level, a more consistent, maybe more well-rounded level. There's some answers that they got to get there, and they got to get them fast.
Yeah, this is something we talked about on our No Huddle, me and Ben McKee, who is not with it. Well, he's not on this podcast, but the good news, I guess, for Tennessee, and it's hard. It doesn't really feel right to say good news when talking about a season-ending injury for a guy that's so beloved in the program. But Tennessee has played its linebackers a lot over the past 2 seasons, and this goes back to Brian Jean-Marie last season, playing those young guys after Peely went down. He kind of just said, I think they probably went into the season thinking, hey, we're going to play Peely and Aaron Beasley, and then we're going to work Arion Carter and Elijah Herring in. Then Peely gets hurt, and they kind of just said, and I think Jean-Marie was like, screw it, we're just going to play everybody. And they did. They rotated 4 and 5 guys into games, and William Inge has done the same thing. He talked in the preseason about wanting to play a lot of guys, and he has. We've seen Jalen Smith get a lot of run. Yeah. T-Lander's kind of been that third guy behind Peely and Carter, but I think Caleb Perry missed the game, but he's gotten a handful of snaps in each game. Spillman played even some on defense against Oklahoma. Now he's obviously been hurt for the last couple of weeks. I don't know if he's going to be necessarily back for this one, but so they've played those guys to where T-Lander and Carter are sophomores, but they've played a lot of football, especially obviously Carter had the injury last season, so T-Lander probably ended up playing more than him, but they're young guys, but not necessarily inexperienced. And so I think that helps maybe alleviate the loss here. Plus, they played all last season without Peely. So this isn't really going to be a huge change, I think, for the defense. Now, obviously, I think T-Lander is going to be the primary one with the green dot on the helmet, handling the communication from Tim Banks and the staff, communicating those things. I think that's a role that will be fine for him. I think he's got a good presence about him. I think he knows the game pretty well. His father was a college coach, so and he obviously had a very productive high school career at a couple different high schools in Georgia. So I think he's a solid guy to plug in there. Is he going to be as good as Keenan Peely? I don't know. When T-Lander's been on the field, he's generally been pretty productive. So I think that's a positive. For the linebackers as a whole, I think this is a chance really for Arion Carter to step up. It felt like when he was not on the field against Florida, when it was another combination of the others, you noticed it. There were some ups and downs for those guys. I think Perry's a solid player, but he doesn't maybe give you the upside of a Carter or even a T-Lander. Jalen Smith had some real ups and downs. There were a few plays where you're like, what the heck is he doing? He's out of his gap. They run the tight end in the flat for the 15th time in the game right by him. And you're like, where are you looking? How do you not, pick up on that? But you look and he ends up with 4 tackles too. So he's around the football and making some things happen. So again, I think this is a credit to both Inge for trusting and rotating, and also Jean-Marie too for recruiting a lot of these guys and also playing them last season to where it's not like, I don't know, maybe a comparable situation on the defense because they've rotated so many guys to where it would be like if they lost, I don't know, maybe go back to 21 and Theo Jackson. And he wasn't like a commodity, a proven commodity at that point anyway, but yeah, he's not a guy that's maybe it's the safeties from the past couple of years because they played McCullough so much, which he's doing fine in the NFL, by the way. They played that guy so much that, and the guys behind him so little that if they had lost him, you'd be plugging in a virtual unknown. Whereas you lose Peely, Ryan, and you're plugging in some guys that maybe haven't been starters or had to be and play and produce like starters and be difference makers like Peely has been. But guys that at least have experience and know what to expect, know how to play the game, know the defense, and know how to execute.
Yeah, it might be comparable to the current safety situation where we saw Tennessee play four guys at that position Saturday night. So you've got some experience there in Jacoby Thomas and Christian Charles. So if one of those starters went down, you at least have an experienced guy to plug in. So maybe a little similar to that. But I do think, to your point, Arion Carter's the one guy there that strikes me as having sort of the high end ability. I think you had a couple of those guys with Peely out there, so I do think you lose a bit with this. I think there's maybe a little step back in terms of just overall ability, but to your point, they've got depth. It's not a situation where the guys behind them haven't been prepared, haven't played a lot. So second year guys that have now played about a year and a half. Even Arion Carter's injury last year was toward the end of the season, so those guys have a good bit of experience under their belts and are pretty well prepared for this, all things considered. But it is a blow, and I think it's we kind of touched on it. That Edwin Spillman injury, I think, looms a little larger now because I think that this chips away at that depth just enough that do you keep playing four guys? It's an interesting situation to me. I think Caleb Perry has to play more now for sure, and I've heard talk of him maybe getting some work at the Mike position. So we'll see what they decide to do there. That's an interesting call to me. I would personally think Arion Carter is maybe the more natural fit to get more work at Mike, kind of in relief of T-Lander, so that those guys could sort of be interchangeable at the Mike spot, maybe a little more so, while T-Lander would be the starter. But it sounds like there's a chance Caleb Perry gets some work there. So we'll see how they decide to attack that. But without Spillman, there's not that sort of next guy up that you feel at least has sort of that high-end capability, even though we've seen very little of it with Spillman so far. He's only played in 2 games, but he's, I think, a guy that a lot of people in the program are excited about, and this would have been a big opportunity for him. So, you kind of touched on this, Patrick. I don't know that he's back this week. Sounds like maybe the Kentucky game after the open date is a more realistic target for him to potentially return. So that depth does get chipped away at a little bit, but at least in this situation, they've got some guys who played a lot. And as long as T-Lander and Carter are out there, I think you feel pretty good. Without those guys out there, without that specific combination out there, I think Tennessee's got a little bit of concern there about how you're going to match up with a team, especially a team like Alabama.
Yeah, and I think the last thing. Go ahead, Pat.
Sorry, Wes. I don't mean to jump in there on you. Just I think to Ryan's point, if you were going to work another guy in there in a short span of time, you might be leaning on maybe your most experienced or intelligent guy, the guy who maybe knows the defense the best, because you need to have a contingency plan if anything happened to T-Lander in this game. So who's going to be your green dot guy if he goes down? Are you going to slide Carter over? Do you plug Perry in there? That you're kind of getting low on options at that point. But after this game, you maybe have an extra week to work one of those guys in there, or if Spillman is healthy, give him a lot of opportunities to get used to it. And I'm sure that they've worked that in practice too. But yeah, I mean, the way the schedule falls, you almost is like, okay, you just got to get through this game, and then you can maybe sort of reassess and sort of figure it out for the last month of the season. But yeah, I do think you also need to make sure that if anything, if T-Lander sprained his ankle on the first drive, you would need to make sure you have somebody who can go in there and do what that role needs to be. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably playing linebacker. It's probably not that much different from one position to the next. You still got to play the run and be in the right gap and play your zones right. But the way that they've been operating, I mean, Tennessee's coaching staff, I'm sure, planned all offseason for Peely to be that guy, Wes, to, hey, he's getting the play, he's communicating it, he's got the presence, he's got the experience. It's not nothing for sure. It's not something that Tennessee it's impossible to overcome it, but it is something that is going to have to be worked through. And obviously T-Lane will get the first crack, but like I said, they've got to have other guys to have, be ready in case they're needed to step up there too.
Well, no, that's actually a good drop in, Pat, because I wasn't going to mention that. And that's a good point. But I think for me, one thing before we go to break that I'll say about it is one thing I really, really like about Peely is how much thump he gives that run defense. And because of his size, his age, it's just, Tennessee's defensive line does not get blown off the ball very often. So you're usually going to be in position to make plays against the run. But I think him being behind that front four gave you so much thump against the run that, it was a couple times Florida was able to, after it went, horizontally for a while and got Tennessee leaning left or right or head on a swivel, then it sort of started to hit a couple of those little plays right up between the center and guard, just boom right there. But that doesn't happen against Tennessee's defense very often. And I still think if Peely's in the game, maybe that stuff doesn't happen. because he was just very, very sound about being in the right gap. And when he got there, he plays the game violently, and he plays it the way you want a linebacker to play it, with just the size and twitch and thump he gives you in the run. So that's one thing, because Tennessee's defense, so many of the things they're able to do is sort of predicated around the fact that you can't just run right at them. If you're a defense and people can't just go right up the gut on you, that takes away a lot of fears for other things. So you have more time to do other things. You can get more elaborate on the back end. You're also more often going to be in second and long and third and long situations if you don't give up runs right up the gut. So many things Tennessee does were on that foundation, and now that foundation's got a crack in it. So maybe not broken, but there's a little crack in it, and they're going to have to patch that, because I have some concerns there. I think Thielander is probably the next best option for that, because he does play the game really violently, and he is a smart guy, and he knows which gap to be in. But he's probably not going to be able to play, 80 snaps, or if 77, if something like that. It's going to be too much to ask, probably, if a game goes that way. So we shall see. But Tennessee still got a good defense. I don't know if it's going to be as good maybe as it could have been, but still going to be a pretty good defense. I think that front four is really a front 12, and it's a problem for anybody who plays Tennessee, Alabama included. But I still think when you look at the SEC, one thing that every SEC team, except for maybe Texas, should be the most afraid of is the mirror, because everybody's got problems. Everybody's got problems. And that's one thing that if you want to hang your hat on that, you can say, hey, if any team sort of emerges from this scrap later in the season to challenge Texas, or, challenge Georgia, whatever it is, because Georgia's got problems of its own too. But, I think that gives you some hope, right? That gives you some hope going into the second half of the season. So there's a lot to talk about. And I mentioned the word hope a lot because we're about to talk about Tennessee's offense here in the second segment. And maybe there's reason for hope there. I don't know if hope springs eternal, but might not be a done deal. This offense might be okay. It might not be. We're going to discuss some reasons why it may and why it may not be okay. But before we do that, we're overdue for a break. Let's go pay some bills, listen to product, services, in-house ads, etc., and then come right back here on the GoVols247 Podcast. #ad. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast, brought to you by whatever products, services, and in-house ads you just heard a moment ago during that commercial break. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio here on a beautiful Monday afternoon in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee, joined by Patrick Brown and Ryan Callahan, talking Tennessee football. The Vols still maybe not quite top 10 anymore, kind of right there outside of it, but can go right back into it if they are able to beat Alabama, the 7th-ranked Tide, on Saturday at Neyland Stadium, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Talked about that a lot in the first segment. We're going to talk about more in the second segment. We're going to talk about at least one, if not two more podcasts this week. It is third Saturday in October week. It is one of the most exciting weeks of the year, usually. So, and now it's different without Nick Saban there. It's certainly different, but I think Josh Heupel put it really well on Monday. He said this game was special before Nick Saban got to Alabama, certainly before I got to Tennessee, and he's got a good point. You look back at it historically, some of the coaches and players and certified legends who have been in this game and have big moments. And also a game where sometimes people have risen to the occasion and sort of made themselves cult-like celebrities or cult-like heroes for plays that they've made in this series. So lots of stuff to talk about there, and we'll get back to that after a quick request to please go rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it or watching it. It's on every platform that you can get, right? And now it's even on YouTube, and it's on Facebook, in addition to, all the podcast apps that you can possibly have. We're on every single one of them. Every place you can cast a pod, you can find this podcast. We do this for free. We're happy to do it. Really, we are. It's a labor of love. But since we're doing it for free, I don't think it's too much to ask to go in there and just rate, review, and hit that subscribe button. A fresh review helps us out a lot with the algorithm, so please go do that. And also tell Tennessee fans in your life, right? whether you live in Knoxville, whether you live in Tennessee, whether you live in the southeastern United States, whether you live in the United States, where I was in London a few weeks ago, saw a couple people wearing Tennessee stuff. They are everywhere in the world where people exist. You can find Tennessee fans. So tell them about this podcast. And if they don't live anywhere near Knoxville, they may be looking forward to even more than people who live here. So tell them about it, please. If you're already doing all that stuff, thank you. We love you. If not,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Offense, fellas. When you go back and watch that game, I've not gone back and watched the whole thing. I've gone back and watched parts of it. There were plays there to be made. There were. There were plays that receivers had gotten into space, or a back had leaked out into space. There were plays there to be made against Florida, and a couple of them were made, but I would argue that more were not made. And especially when it came down to the big plays, the big vertical shots, Tennessee didn't hit any of them really in that game. None of the big vertical shots. And it had a chance on all of them. Every single time the receiver had gotten behind the defensive back. And when Tennessee's offense is at its best, right? We're talking Hooker a couple years ago. The games when Joe Milton was good. The games early in this season when Nico Iamaleava was sharp. Those are plays you hit. And here's where I'm torn on this, guys. The offensive line is what it is, and that's a whole nother discussion. We could spend an entire podcast series discussing why the hell are they what they are right now. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say they're not great up front at tackle, especially, and until they prove otherwise, that's what they are. So you have to work around that. It is what it is. But still, there were times where the protection held up enough and the receiver had gotten behind the defensive back enough for a play to be made, and it wasn't made. And so the good part about that, I would think, I guess I'll start with Pat here, is they're really close to making a lot of those plays, right? Like, we're not talking about these have no shot. We're talking about a couple of them, we're talking 6 inches. A couple of them, we're talking maybe a yard. A couple of them, we're talking about maybe a receiver going to the spot that the quarterback thinks the receiver is going to go. That happened, I think, to Nimrod once, where I don't know if they were on the wrong shoulder or it was just an errant throw. But those plays are right there, and they're going to be there. They're going to have chances to make these plays. So that's good in that there's there to be made. It's good that they're not that far away from making them. It's bad when you go a whole game and don't hit any of them. So where's the level of concern here, and where's the level of hope here?
Well, Wes, I thought listening to Josh Heupel on Monday, he was considerably more upbeat than after the game. After the game, it seemed like he was, I don't want to say defeated, but you could just tell he was frustrated.
Deflated.
Yeah. Almost at a loss. Like, I mean, this guy's, presided over a lot of high-scoring, high-powered offenses. I mean, his offenses here in 21 and 22 broke and then rebroke just about every offensive record imaginable. So as frustrated as you might be watching Tennessee's offense, let it be known that Josh Heupel is far more frustrated than you are. But having said that, I wrote this in the 247 that I posted on Sunday night. I saw light at the end of the tunnel for Tennessee's offense from this game. I saw more to be encouraged by, because one, you saw adjustments, you saw things that were different in a response to Arkansas, which was you left that game wondering, golly, what the heck was that? Like, they got a lot of issues. I went back and charted it. Tennessee rolled Nico out on 10 dropbacks, probably around about 30-ish. And here's the chart for the YouTube follow. Here's the handwriting.
Screenshot that.
He was 6 of 9 for 57 yards. Now, on traditional pocket dropbacks, he was 10 of 17 for 112 yards. There were a couple of scrambles in each of those as well, and I think all 3 sacks, if I'm remembering correctly. I didn't go look at those. Just the pass attempts. I think all the sacks were pocket based. So you saw an adjustment. You saw a coach that said, "Okay, I have a quarterback that's seeing and feeling the pressure, so I'm going to roll him out away from it. I have an offensive line that's shaky in protection, maybe at the offensive tackle position, so I'm going to move the pocket and take the pressure off them." And on 2 plays, they had Squirrel White and Ches Nimrod running wide open down the middle of the field. I think one was slant and a go. Squirrel hits a slant and just goes right up the middle of the field. The other one was more of a sort of an angle route for Nimrod. They both just narrowly missed. To me, as a coach, that's all you can do is scheme guys open, and they schemed 2 guys open right there. And you just got to make the play. And, the reason I say there's encouragement is because do we see any of that against Arkansas? I think there were guys open, but there were not like that, like schemed guys open. There were guys open just in the natural flow of the offense based on how Arkansas was playing defensively. So that was positive, I thought. And then, again, you saw those downfield shots. You saw some aggressiveness. You saw the man go for it on 4th one is on 10, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Everyone in the press box, all of us were like, hey, they're just going to jump offside. They're not actually going to go for it.
What are you doing?
And as soon as it snapped, I think everybody in the stadium collectively held their breath like, oh, crap, they're actually going for it. It could have been a huge backfire. And ironically, it kind of ended up like they didn't get it because a few plays later, Florida had 1st and 10 at the 11 after an interception and a penalty. So, and I think the pass protection overall was better in the Florida game than it was against Arkansas. I think the pressure rate on the PFF was down. Now, again, it probably doesn't say a whole lot about your offensive line if you have to roll the pocket that much. But I think that makes things easier for Nico, especially when you're like, hey, Nico, you're just going to roll to your right about 10 yards, and I'm going to have a guy for you running right down the middle of the field wide open. Just chuck it and let him run under it. So, I mean, I see that. They had a nice play for Ethan Davis on a tight end screen we hadn't seen for a few games. They just didn't block it right.
Man, if that's right, blocked. Oh.
Play didn't block it right. So you saw little things. You saw the short yardage package that they broke out. I think it would be a huge disappointment if we didn't see that again in this game against Alabama. You saw some of the things that we've seen the staff do before where they're scheming guys open and they are adjusting, they're sort of molding, doing things differently to help the offense, and they're breaking out new stuff. Now, this is sort of the second game in a row. It's sort of a carbon copy where something was just off. And now I think a lot of it in this game, I always like to say that, just hammering the quarterback, criticizing the quarterback is always the low-hanging fruit when an offense isn't doing well. But I do think there were a lot of issues for Nico in this past game against Florida. I think it started with the fumble on the first drive. You look at the first drive, they roll him out on the first play. There was a great pass to Nimrod for 15 yards. Then a couple plays later, I think it was a 3rd down. He starts, he's looking left. He comes back right through his progression. Squirrel's open, dart, easy play. It seemed like after that, he was just sort of jumpy, jittery, rushed, hurried, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if that filtered through the rest of the offense. I mean, it's not really Nico's fault that his offensive tackles held 3 times when he was scrambling out of the pocket. And those are tough plays for offensive tackles because they can't beat the quarterback. And as the defensive lineman tries to get out, I think that's the point John Campbell was trying to make, is that he didn't have his arms outside. So how is that a penalty? I thought one of them on Hurd was pretty, I mean, if you called that, they'd be holding every other play. But just, those little things like that. They had a series where they had 3 sacks in a row. I think it was different something every time. And then they have guys open and they can't complete it. Nico had the bad interception where, you compare that play to the one on the first drive where he went through his progression. He locks in on Brew McCoy on one side of the field. On the other side of the field, he's got Brazel coming open. He's got Ethan Davis running a wheel that he breaks off under coverage, and nobody's near him. I mean, it wouldn't have been a touchdown, but it would have been a 15, 20-yard gain. He's also got Bishop as the safety valve. So I don't know if maybe that's just the growing pain of young quarterback. So the counterpoint, if you want to be less optimistic about all of this, is that Tennessee just is what it is. We've seen this now for 2 games. That makes it a trend. And that trend is you have a quarterback who's shaky. Maybe he has a little bit of the yips, a little bit of confidence, doesn't see the field well, gets, pressure gets to him a little bit. You have an offensive line that's shaky in protection, whether that's a tackle. They gave up some interior pressure in this game. I think Florida had a sack off a twist. Deshaun Bishop has had 2 games in a row now where he's had costly mistakes in pass protection. And another 3rd down in the red zone where they had Squirrel on a whip route where he sort of breaks outside and comes back over the middle. It's wide open. He catches it with his speed. He might have scored on that play. It would have easily been a 3rd down conversion. But Bishop, blitzing linebacker gets past him. Nico airmails the throw because he's rushed. So, and then the receivers, I think we need to talk about them. They've not been – I think they've been a little bit of a letdown. And that they're just not as quite dynamic as maybe we thought. There's not a lot of yak going on there. Obviously, Nimrod had a drop late in the game that was pretty, probably cost Tennessee a shot at a long field goal there at the end of regulation. Chris Brausel made a heck of a catch, but was just out of bounds on a play in the fourth quarter. You just haven't seen enough of that. Brew McCoy was kind of anonymous out there. I think they got him an end around, but that was it. And all these things kind of play together. And if you put all that stuff together, you can see why this offense is struggling. So it's just a matter of, is the glass half empty or glass half full? And after that long diatribe, Ryan's probably falling asleep. I know he is always a glass half full kind of guy.
Well, always. Most optimistic dude I've ever known, Ryan Callahan.
So I will pitch it to Ryan and say, having said all of that, are you glass half full or glass half empty on the state of the Tennessee offense, given that, you see some reasons for hope, but also they just might be what they are at this point?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, after going back and watching the game again, I kind of felt like you that there is maybe a little more of a light at the end of the tunnel than I would have thought just immediately after the game. When we talked on the post-game podcast, I was probably a little more down on Tennessee's offense at that time. Seeing it on the replay, it looked like there were some things that were there that they just didn't connect on, that just didn't click for whatever reason. And I did see some nice adjustments. I thought getting Nico on more rollouts was a good move. He looked more comfortable, frankly, outside the pocket than he does in the pocket, and that's concerning though. At the same time, Nico's always been more of a pocket guy. Even in high school, that's sort of, he could obviously he can run and has done that throughout his career, but he doesn't like to get out there and run it 15, 17 times a game. He's someone that ideally picks his spots with that and otherwise does most of his work from the pocket. So you don't want to see a young quarterback kind of shaky back there and not confident in his pass protection or not trusting what he's seeing or second guessing himself on his reads, whatever it might be, whatever's going through his head. It just looks like something's uneasy about it. And all that sort of shakes your confidence a little bit. But seeing it there against the Florida team that you would expect them to, frankly, make some plays against, they had opportunities to make some plays. So I think there's a chance that we see Tennessee improve from where they've been. I think it's definitely worth noting that Dante Thornton was virtually a non-factor in this game, except for what he did in overtime, and that Brew McCoy, is obviously playing hurt. So is Squirrel White, for that matter. I credit him for toughing it out and finding ways to make plays. But that's a factor in all this too, is that they're not healthy at wide receiver, and that's not great for a group that was already, I think, struggling a bit to make some of those yards after the catch kind of plays. It's also on the quarterback to set them up for yards after the catch, so that's worth noting too.
Yep.
I think Nico will continue to help those guys and hit them in stride and lead them to space. So there's a little bit of blame to go all around, but I did, after the Arkansas game, I kind of felt like there was a little more blame to go on the offensive line after that game. After a couple games in a row, I kind of think, even though you try to resist the temptation to point to the quarterback, but it kind of feels to me like the quarterback is more of what's not firing on all cylinders right now. The protection issues, they're there. You got to work around those, and that's for sure a concern. But they protected better in the second half, and aside from the one stretch of 3 consecutive sacks, it wasn't a just colossal failure the rest of the game. So you've got to clean some things up for sure, but there's at least reason to think, okay, I could see this improving. And now the flip side of that is you're doing this against not great defenses. Florida's okay defensively. Arkansas, they're good, but not great.
I think good. I think good is a fair description for them.
Yeah. So now I don't know how many great defenses Tennessee's going to face the rest of the way, but they're not just struggling because they're facing great defenses. That's the one real downside of this is you could maybe say, oh, how are they going to fare against an Alabama or Georgia? Now the silver lining here, Alabama's not been very good defensively, and they're not even getting after the quarterback that well. So I think this is a really important game coming up for a lot of reasons, but I think it's important for Tennessee to get some confidence offensively. If we don't see some improvement against an Alabama defense that's given up some big plays and that isn't getting after the quarterback the way they often have in the past, then I think there's a legitimate reason to be concerned that they're just not going to be able to put it together in the way that we expected them to this year. And they may not get to that point anyway, but I think they at least have a chance to be better than they've been the last 2 weeks. So I did come away looking at it a little more optimistically after seeing the replay, but definitely, like Patrick said, it's a trend now, and you still have to make plays. At the end of the day, an offense that's this much off is still not connecting, and you've got to connect, or those plays just aren't gonna happen, and you are what you are offensively.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things there. One is two kind of micro points and then one macro point. I think, to me, when the parts of the game that I went back and watched, it looked like even when the protection got better, Nico is expecting it to not be good. He looks like a guy whose offensive tackles have been burned a few too many times and it's in his head. He just looks to me like he's sped up. He looks to me like he is concerned at all times about getting hit from a defensive end or linebacker on either side.
I will say at the same time, he needed to speed up. I don't think his internal clock was running fast enough.
Fair enough.
He needs to start to get the ball quicker. But yeah, if it's in your head, that's a problem. If you're thinking about, I need to get rid of the ball quicker instead of just doing it, it's not as instinctual. It's a problem.
Yeah, that's something that concerns me. And the other thing that concerns me, excuse me, this seems like there are very few things to me in football more frustrating than a deep ball where the receiver has no chance to make the play. When you're throwing those passes downfield, it's good for a quarterback to have the instinct to throw the ball where it cannot be intercepted. That is a good instinct to have. And frankly, if Nico had maybe a little bit more of that over the middle, that would be a good thing at times. But on some of those deep vertical shots, if you are going to make an error there, underthrow it a little bit, because you give the receiver, especially if it's someone like Brazel, for instance, or McCoy, somebody like that, Thornton, they're going to be taller or bigger than whoever they're going against. They're going to be able to go up and make a play on the ball. And if nothing else, they can go knock it down. They can do whatever. Give them a chance to make a play. When guys are behind the defense and you throw a ball that they can't catch, you're wasting a down. And especially if it's third down, dude, an arm punt's not the worst thing in the world there. You don't often see deep vertical shots down the sideline turned into pick sixes. Usually that doesn't happen because the receiver's going to get him down or somebody else is going to be in the vicinity. You have time to go back there and get them. It's not the end of the world. And I hope that's a coaching point they're telling him, that you have to give him a chance to make the play. That's something that you just have to do. And then, excuse me, my macro point is, I hope for Heupel's sake that they're able to get this thing turned where they want it to be turned offensively, because if not, there starts to be at that point a conversation, because that would be back-to-back years where the offense hasn't been what it normally is. And, it's one thing if it's one time and you put all this on Milton and he just couldn't put it together and, it was inconsistent, yada, yada. The receivers weren't great. Okay. There's your one. That's your pass, right? That's your hall pass. So then when you go out and spend a bunch of money to make sure that you get Lance Hurd. If we're being honest, that's a big NIL thing you got to go get done. And they did. You go get some receivers that you want. You got a quarterback who everyone knows in the ballpark of what he was worth. So they've gone out there. He's had the tools, excuse me, and another year to go fix this. And if it's not, then I guess at that point you're saying, well, Nico's a year older next season and we'll see. But you just don't want, if you're known for one side of the ball as a coach, you don't want that side to not be as good as it should be 2 years in a row. That's an uncomfortable conversation. And so I hope for Heupel's sake that he's able to avoid that, because if it's a new cast of characters and it's the same thing, that's a problem. Like, I don't know how you can't put that nicely. That's a problem, I think.
I will say, I think the most overblown storyline or narrative that's been out there the last 10 days or so since the Arkansas game is the SEC defenses that figured out Josh Heupel's offense. I don't see that. When you watch the game and you see their guys open. They've had receivers open. If they protected better, they'd have even more receivers open, more opportunities to make plays. I don't think that this idea that Josh Heupel's offense has been figured out and Tennessee's got to adjust is the reality.
I agree with that. I'm just saying in terms of,
yeah,
it's getting solved. I mean, it's not that it's being solved, it's that they're not making plays.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't think that's what you were saying. I just wanted to address that because I think a little bit of that's out there. And I think that's an easy conclusion to jump to, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think what's happening is, if anything, Tennessee is and again, we'll see. The jury's still out on Lance Hurd. He's only a sophomore. It's not as though he's a lost cause. Darnell Wright looked pretty rough early in his career at times, and then ends up being a top 10 pick. So you don't know with guys like that, and he needs a full normal off season to improve his conditioning, frankly, and continue to work. And he's in his first year as a starter. So it's not unusual for a guy like that, and especially that's missed some time, to have some bumps in the road. And there's some other guys. Sure, John Campbell played a lot of football. He's having some issues too. They're struggling with some veterans. So that what I would say is the problem that I think we're seeing exposed is maybe Tennessee betting on the wrong horses. And we'll just have to see how the rest of the season plays out to see whether that is the case. But I think in other words, I just think it's more of a talent problem than a coaching or scheme problem or anything like that. I think Tennessee's offense has plenty of answers. Joe Milton had his limitations. I think people are just shocked that Nico's having some issues where this offense seems to have a glass ceiling right now of about 180 passing yards per game. That's not what we're used to seeing from Josh Heupel.
And it's not good enough.
No. And so people are surprised by that, but he's still a young quarterback. And I'll go back to what we said coming out of high school, and maybe we didn't stress it enough, and maybe we just assumed that the natural ability would take over pretty quickly. But Nico was raw coming out of high school. He was not a lifelong quarterback that was just college ready. I think people look at that ranking and just assume plug and play start. Like, people thought he should have been playing last year for that matter. And there's still, sure, there's a case to be made for that. But my point is, I think you could have made the case coming out of high school that he was a guy that, if you told me you're not going to see what he's capable of until year 3, I could have seen that, because he was raw. And the other thing at quarterback is you just don't know. And Josh Heupel and some of the issues he ran into at Oklahoma his last couple of years were at the quarterback position. It's because everybody gets that position wrong sometimes. Alabama's had it. Everybody's had it. It's just a hard position to get right. So all that to say, no one guessed wrong on Nico, and Nico's not a lost cause or anything like that. But if it turns out that he's got just some field vision issues and some stuff that's going to take some time to work through, that's just quarterback, man. Everybody goes through this at times, and it is the hardest position to get right. Sometimes there's no safe bet, even the number 1 overall player or number 2 overall player in his class. So it's just one of those things you got to deal with. And so if Tennessee has problems offensively, and we'll find out for sure this week how much of an issue this is and how much of a long-running recurring theme this is. But if they have an issue, I think it's more of a talent issue, that they've got to continue to get better at receiver, on the offensive line, all those things. And they've got guys in the pipeline, and they'll continue to go to the transfer portal probably to patch things up. But they've just got to get better at those positions, I think. And that's the problem, not Josh Heupel, no longer being able to scheme things around SEC defenses.
Ryan, I think you're right in talking about with Nico. I think it's more growing pains than I don't think it's a talent issue, and I don't think it's a mentality issue. I don't think he's got like a bad head on his shoulder or anything. I mean, we've heard comments the past couple weeks about maybe how hard he took the Arkansas game, and Heupel was not questioning how much he cares and how much Nico wants to be good. I think he is a guy who wants to succeed for his teammates. His teammates love him. And he's really endeared himself to everyone in that locker room. So he's trying to succeed for them. And Heupel was asked Monday about if he thought Nico was pressing for whatever reason. And look, I mean, that might be part of being young and going through it for the first time. The other personnel questions might be on the offensive line, where they are, they're having to rely on some older guys, and we don't need to beat a dead horse on how the offensive line room and the starting lineup has gotten to the point it has. But I mean, there's obviously, it probably wasn't ideal that Lance Hurd had a knee deal in the summer and was limited for a lot of camp. I think that probably hurt his conditioning and maybe physical readiness. And maybe you've seen some of that. And again, he's a young player. He's just a sophomore. Darnell Wright comparison was probably a good one, Ryan, that Darnell Wright was not top 10 pick ready in 2020. And that's not to say the Herd's definitely going to get there one day, but again, he's a young player that's still figuring it out and still going through a lot of this for the first time, because I think he only started one game at LSU. I think he's probably already played more snaps this season than he did all last season. So, and I don't think he was an early guy either. So he's still seeing a lot of this stuff for the first time. He's still going through the full season. He's still developing physically. I mean, he's what, 19? So,
19. Yeah.
I think it's maybe a bigger question at wide receiver. And it seemed like they had the horses there. We just, for whatever reason, haven't seen them, take over games, or, they don't necessarily have a number one, and people are like, well, why can't they do what they did with Hyatt? And because they don't have a Jalen Hyatt. They don't have a guy like that on this roster. And I think, maybe those deep passes look a little different the other night if you're running them with Dante Thornton. Not to say that Squirrel White doesn't have speed, not to say that Chaz Nimrod doesn't have speed, but, and maybe Chris Brazel needs to be one of those guys too. Can he stretch the field? So
I'd like to see more chances for him to stretch the field.
They just maybe haven't found the right combination yet. And as we talked about too, three of their most reliable guys are banged up right now. I mean, Thornton and Brew and Squirrel White were all on the injury report last week. And, Brew's playing with something on his finger. Squirrel's got a shoulder that after that long play, I don't know how much he was back in at the end of the game. He was kind of favoring that a little bit. Dante played 7 snaps, but he didn't play all game. And then he didn't play all game, and he pops up in overtime and makes a catch. And first of all, when Nico pulled that RPO out and threw it, I was like, why are you throwing it? So many things go wrong when you throw it there. And then, Dante's reaching for the goal line, and I got visions of Pig Howard.
Yeah.
In my head, why are you reaching for the goal line? Just go down. Don't reach the ball out. Just, you're down at the 3, kick the field, whatever. And that was another part of aggression, by the way, is how many times do we see coaches play for a field goal there at that situation overtime, and Tennessee did not.
No one would have complained if they had played for a field goal there. No one would have had a legit.
I think that was a good move because they got some positive plays early and just said, we don't need to. Yeah, I mean, at that point, you could have maybe tried a field goal that would have been an extra point, but shoot, you never know. I mean, put the ball in your offense's hands. Put Jackson Moy at fullback and Nathan Robinson, who played offensive tackle in high school, Ryan, and let him harken back to those days and just powered in. So, I think that's the question we're going to find out in the next few days, in this game against Alabama is, are these issues temporary? Can they be overcome, or are they going to be season-long things that Tennessee's just going to have to power through? And, would it surprise you? I don't know that Tennessee's going to all of a sudden start averaging 40 points a game, but could they have their day where they hang 40 or something on somebody? Yes. Absolutely. If that game the other night, they hit 2 of those deep shots, that game looks a lot different. And even if you miss those and Nimrod makes that catch on 4th down, you might be kicking a field goal to win the game at the end. So it's just little things, but again, we'll find out soon enough if it's just a little bit of execution here or there, or if it's the personnel is not what it needed to be or not what we thought it was.
Oh, and I keep coming back to that fumble on the opening drive. It felt like such it just let all of the air out of the balloon. I mean, they came out looking sharp, went straight down the field. They're in position to maybe score on their first possession, and then that fumble, it just felt like it changed the tone going forward for Nico, and it might have been here we go again. He had 2 really nice throws before that, I thought, and it just was, everything was a little different after that. So you gotta avoid mistakes like that. Sometimes it's not even a throw that can throw off a quarterback, and plays like that are going to change a game sometimes. But that felt to me like one that changed the course of the rest of the half for sure.
It did, but I wonder, it happened so early that's the only reason why I'm not sure, because to me, sometimes we saw this with a lot of Jim Chaney offenses, right? Like the scripted part of it looks great.
Sure.
Because you practice that all week and there you go. And then once you get out of that, you're like, then you got to, make adjustments. And that's where they didn't look nearly as prepared or good, just to be honest. But also I think you're right. I mean, you still see times where there was one play in particular I remember where if Nico it's one where he threw the ball, it was a tough throw because he waited too long, but he still put the ball on the receiver's hands, but the receiver was blanketed at that point and couldn't make the play down the sideline. And if he throws that just a step sooner, that receiver's in space. and he just didn't quite see it on time. He didn't get rid of it. Sometimes that's where the older quarterback stuff helps, because you're throwing to a spot, trusting that your receiver is going to be open, because you trust that receiver is going to be where he needs to be by the time you throw that ball there. That's what you've been coached to do. That's what the system says. I mean, that's why Peyton and Marvin Harrison used to spend hour after hour after hour in the offseason just throwing all those passes. It's like, I know where you're going to be, and this is where I'm going to throw the ball. And that's where, by the time, sometimes that's how the tough part about quarterback is when you throw the ball, sometimes you're throwing the guy open, and sometimes you're throwing it to a space. And you can't, like, if you wait for him to be open, he's not going to be open maybe by the time the ball gets there. Because if you see it, the defense can see it too, and they're going to get over there, and they can see where your eyes are. So it's just little things like that to me that are a concern that you always have with young quarterbacks. So that's why it could, I think, get better. I also would like to see Brazel get more shots on vertical shots. I think he's a guy who, once he gets going, he moves pretty well, and he's a big target. And I think he's one, especially if Thornton's going to be banged up for a little bit here this week, because he still needs the off week to get ready to really be himself again. Then I think it's important, I would say imperative, to give Brazel some more shots vertically. I think he can help you there. But you got to put the throw on him. You got to give him a chance. But we know Dylan Sampson's good. We know that. And Tennessee's blocking well enough for him when he's running the ball that if you have a defense like Tennessee's got, and you have number 6 on offense, you got a chance. And that's what's keeping these guys afloat in a lot of ways right now. So wrap him in bubble tape. Don't get him hurt until Saturday, and then let her rip. I mean, that's kind of where they are right now. I'm fascinated to see sort of how much they grow through this, because I imagine since Nico's played quarterback in his life, there have not been any serious obstacles in his way. Even in California at the high school level, at the higher levels there, he still was so talented that it didn't matter. He was able to just go out there and out talent people. And now for the first time, he's got some adversity. And now some of these guys like Lance Hurd, probably the first time in their life, they're having adversity on the field. So go do it. What are you going to do about it? Right. That's the stuff that you, personality wise, recruiting, it's not just talent. You're recruiting guys who mentally, psychologically can fight through these things. And that's a part of it. That's why they build this stuff. So I'm interested to see.
Yeah, they look for competitors. They really, the staff tries to take that into account to the extent that you can. The recruiting process, you're looking for guys with the right competitive makeup. They talk about that all the time. And this is exactly why you got to have that. You got to have guys who are willing to fight through it, who aren't going to turn and run at the first sign of adversity, and who are going to find a way to break through when things are tough. So, to your point on Nico, I do think that's part of the issue. It looks to me like he's waiting to see guys open instead of throwing them open. And that's not uncommon for young quarterbacks. So again, that's part of the sort of being raw in his development piece of it, where I think he's just got to keep playing through it. Still got to develop and figure it out. And again, this offense, there's reason to think they could make some strides in the coming weeks. They got to find a way to go do it now, and it might be tough with some receivers banged up and some things like that everybody deals with this time of the year. But at least this week, you're facing an Alabama defense that's struggled to make stops at times, and it's a huge point in the season. Obviously, if you're going to make the college football playoff, you really need to win this game. That path gets a lot slimmer, and you basically have no margin.
It's went out.
Yeah, this one. You got to win out the rest of the way pretty much if you don't win this one. So it's now or never, and you got to figure out a way to get it done in this game, and that's probably going to involve having to score more points than they had the last 2 games to have a real shot at winning this game, I think.
But you know what, Pat, final thought, name one team that has ever, competed for or won a championship that didn't have to go through things exactly like this. If you're going to go through it at any point in the season, especially in a football season, you're going to have weeks where things aren't working. You're going to have weeks where important guys are banged up. You're going to have weeks where the other team gets the breaks. You're going to have weeks where, or if you're Tennessee for like a month in a row, your opponents never get called for a single live ball penalty, right? Like it's amazing how few live ball penalties Tennessee's opponents have committed this season. And maybe they've just played that clean. I don't know. I kind of would look at that Florida punt return and be like, you had 2 blocks in the back there. You could have picked either one and called them, but you called none of them. That would have been really, really important if Florida had come back to win that game. You think we'd be talking about that? I bet we would. But that's what happens in a season. If you want to win a championship or compete for a championship, Pat, you're going to have to play through stuff like that.
Yeah. And, that game, Tennessee found a way. They don't ask how, they ask how many, right?
Indeed. When in doubt, there's a Letterkenny quote that will fix your life. That's a good reference to end on there.
And hey, 1998. I'm not saying this team's the 1998 team, but that team stunk offensively a couple games in the first half of the season. They scored 17 points at Auburn and could have lost that game to a not very good Auburn team. T. Martin had some ugly moments early in that season. They had to win against Florida with ball control and defense and Al Wilson, basically. So good teams have gone through tougher stretches than this offensively. So let's not just throw out this team and assume the offense is doomed to stink the rest of the year. They've got enough talent to think they can turn this around.
I agree. I think there is hope there. I think where that what was the Dooley the door sign, opportunity is now here. More than opportunity is nowhere. We'll end on that. When in doubt, go to Letterkenny for a quote, and when in doubt, go to Derek Dooley for an idea, for inspiration. That's good. That's good stuff right there.
What about a Butch Jones phrase, Wes? You want to go to one of those?
Only if you want to be
playing the red team this week. The red team this week.
How'd that work out for you?
That didn't work out too good, did it?
No, the red team sort of beat your ass. That's kind of what happened that year. So yeah, don't be allowing that.
But you know what? I think we're past the era where everybody else recruits and Alabama drafts and they get the first 25 picks in the draft. To quote.
Really quote. That's great. Yeah, Alabama now, just like everybody else, having to luck out some wins, having to give up some big plays in a game, but try to find a way around it. Just not. It's a little different. It's a little different, but we'll see how different it is on Saturday, and we'll have a full week to discuss all of that. So, if you're listening on one of the audio feeds, then you'll hear the outro. If not, this will be the end of your GoVols247 podcast experience today. So, thank you for keeping your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times. Thank you for behaving yourselves in line. And Pat and Ryan, thanks for being here, guys.